I knew something was off the moment I pulled into the empty slip where my boat should have been, gone, just gone. Now, I'm not new to HOA drama. I've lived in this lakeside community for 6 years, and in that time, I've seen it all from weekly lawn inspections to paint swatches being rejected because they don't evoke enough community harmony. But this was new. I walked up the dock, scanning the water, heart hammering. That's when I spotted her, Tiffany Landers, the HOA president and full-time menace, 50-something, bob haircut, sunglasses too big for her face, and a clipboard like it was surgically attached to her hand. She was standing at the edge of the boardwalk, arms crossed, like she was waiting for me. "Looking for something, Camden?" she asked, voice dripping with fake innocence. "My boat's gone," I said, keeping my tone even. "Was in slip 24 yesterday," she squinted at me. "You mean that eyesore with the chipped paint? It was violating Marina Cleanliness Clause B.2. My husband, Ron, had it towed this morning." I blinked. "You had my boat towed?" "Actually, Ron did. He's licensed for municipal towing now," she said proudly, like that made it okay. "We warned you in the last HOA bulletin. Page 6. I stared at her. "You mean the one where you slipped in a marina beautification line between bake sale announcements?" Tiffany shrugged. "You should read more carefully. We're just trying to maintain standards." I clenched my jaw. "Where is it?" "Tow yard. You'll have to pay the storage fee." "And next time, maybe give your boat a power wash, huh?" I turned and walked off before I said something that would get me arrested. Now here's the part Tiffany didn't know. I own the marina, not the boat slip. Not a timeshare. The entire marina. I bought it 2 years ago when the original owners retired and didn't make a big deal about it. Just kept the same name, same staff, just upgraded the back-end systems. Legally, I operate under CP Marina Holdings. I kept it quiet so I didn't have to deal with HOA politics bleeding into my business. But now it was personal. See, Ron Landers didn't just tow a boat, he trespassed on private commercial property. And he did it without a towing permit authorized by the actual marina, which I control, and that license of his. I had a feeling he hadn't read the fine print. I headed back to my office above the bait shop, pulled up the marina's security footage, and found exactly what I needed: Ron in his red Ford tow truck, backing into the dock at 6 in the morning, unhooking my boat and hauling it off. No authorization, no paperwork, just blatant overreach. I hit download, then picked up the phone. "Detective Voss," answered a familiar voice on the other end. "Hey, it's Camden Prescott. I've got a situation involving theft, trespassing, and probably a forged towing license." There was a pause. "This about that HOA again?" "Oh yeah," I said. "And this time, they messed with the wrong marina owner." HOA story HOA stories Homeowners Association stories Detective Voss didn't waste time. By mid-afternoon, he was in my office, his badge clipped to his belt, leaning over my desk as the security footage played. His expression stayed neutral, but I could see the flicker of understanding behind his eyes. "That your signature on any of these towing orders?" he asked, nodding toward the stack of blank marina forms I kept in a locked drawer. "Nope," I said, opening a folder labeled Authorization Logs. "Here's the last 3 weeks, not a single request or approval for any tow. And your staff, all accounted for, no one gave permission, and the dockmaster was on site when Ron showed up. He thought it was authorized by me since I wasn't in that morning." Voss straightened up. "That truck registered to him?" I flipped through the DMV database on the monitor. "Yup. Ronald Landers, vehicle used for private towing, registered for residential removals only. No commercial marina access permit." He raised his eyebrows. "So he's operating outside his license. And on private property he doesn't control," I added, "which bumps this from a civil dispute to criminal trespass and unauthorized vehicle removal." Voss nodded slowly. "I'll get a unit over to the yard. If your boat's still there, we can document the condition and check for any damage. You want to press charges?" I didn't hesitate. "Absolutely, and I want his business flagged. He shouldn't be towing anything bigger than a lawnmower." He scribbled into his notebook. You'll probably want to get your legal counsel involved too. With this level of overreach, you might have grounds for a civil suit." As he left, my phone buzzed. It was Nadia, one of the Marina's maintenance leads. "You're gonna want to hear this," she said. "Word spreading. Ron's been using that tow truck on other properties too. A couple of residents say he moved their jet skis last week, claimed it was part of a new compliance sweep. So this wasn't an isolated stunt. It was a pattern, which meant Tiffany wasn't just overstepping, she was enabling a racket." I called my attorney, a sharp guy named Grayson who'd helped me close on the Marina. "This is going to get messy," he said after I laid everything out. "Good," I replied. "I want it messy. I want every rock turned over." That night I walked the docks, checking each slip. Quiet hum of water against the pylons, soft clinks of rigging tapping masts. A few boat owners saw me and waved. Word was spreading fast. "Hey Camden," shouted a guy from Slip 31. "You hear about the HOA tow bandits?" I raised an eyebrow. "You lose anything?" "Not me." "But Cheryl from 34 says her dinghy vanished last week. Thought her nephew borrowed it. Now, she's not so sure." I made mental notes as I walked. By the time I got back to the office, I had 6 separate incidents reported, all watercraft. All supposedly in violation of some vague HOA beautification clause. All towed by Ron. By morning, I had a thick binder of statements, timestamps, and photos. My boat had been found sitting in a dirt lot behind a chain-link fence, half covered in leaves, ignition wires exposed. Voss had it photographed from every angle. "No visible damage," he said. "But we found tools in the truck, bolt cutters, a cordless grinder, and a lock bypass kit." "Nice little collection," I muttered. "What's the charge list look like?" "Criminal trespass, unauthorized towing on private property, possession of burglary tools, and operating outside the bounds of a towing license," he said. "And if we find out he charged anyone for these unauthorized removals, fraud and theft?" I smiled grimly. "Let me guess, Tiffany's going to play dumb," Voss chuckled. "Already tried, claimed she assumed Ron had permission, blamed the Marina for not posting clearer signs." I flipped open the Marina manual. Page 12, Section D. Signage requirements, including dock permissions, are printed and posted in 4 languages. They're visible from every entryway. "Yeah," he said, "we noticed." 2 hours later, city licensing pulled Ron's towing permit. His truck was impounded pending the investigation, but I wasn't done. I called an emergency meeting of the Marina's co-op board. Most of the members had no idea I owned the place. They'd always known me as the guy who managed operations and fixed the broken pump last summer. When I walked in holding the binder of complaints, jaws tightened. "Ron Landers has been using our docks like his own personal hunting ground," I told them. "He's removed watercraft without authorization, damaged private property, and trespassed on secured marina zones." The board president, a quiet man named Lewis, leaned forward. "You're saying this was coordinated?" "I think it was encouraged," I said. "By Tiffany. She's been issuing memos under the HOA seal instructing residents to stay compliant or risk removal. No legal basis. No coordination with the Marina." I dropped copies of the memos on the table. One board member, a retired judge, scanned the top page and let out a low whistle. "That's not just overreach, that's impersonating jurisdiction." Lewis looked stunned. "How long have you owned the Marina?" 2 years, I said. I kept it quiet to avoid exactly this kind of HOA interference. He nodded slowly. "We'll release a formal statement. Clarify that the Marina is privately owned and not subject to HOA enforcement, and we'll back you if this goes to court." It would. By the weekend, community forums were ablaze. Ron's photo circulated along with screenshots of towing receipts he'd issued to residents, some as high as $300 for removal and cleanup. None of it legal. Tiffany tried damage control. Posted a letter on the neighborhood bulletin board claiming this was all a misunderstanding and that she and Ron had only ever acted in the community's best interest. But her signature was on every memo. And her name was listed as the entity that billed residents for towing fees through a fake shell company registered under her maiden name. Voss called me 2 days later. "Got her," he said. "Mail fraud, unauthorized use of HOA funds, and conspiracy to profit from enforcement actions. City prosecutors opening a formal case." I leaned back in my chair, watching the lake ripple under the late afternoon sun. "Have fun with that paperwork," I said. "Oh, and one more thing," Voss added. "You're going to want to be at the City Council meeting next week. They're reviewing the HOA charter. Word is, it's getting gutted." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, because this wasn't just about a boat anymore. This was about reminding every clipboard tyrant in a polyester suit that there were lines you don't cross. And I owned the dock they thought they controlled. The council chambers were packed, not with the usual dozen or so retirees and zoning nerds, but with a full house. People were standing in the back, leaning against walls, whispering behind cupped hands. Some held up copies of the HOA's forged towing memos or printed screenshots from the Marina surveillance footage. Others clutched handwritten statements, eager to speak. I took a spot near the front, just behind the panel of city officials. Councilwoman DeWitt, a sharp-eyed former prosecutor with a reputation for loathing overreach of any kind, adjusted her glasses as she scanned the agenda. Her aide leaned over and whispered something. She nodded without looking up. Tiffany and Ron sat 3 rows back. She had traded her usual oversized sunglasses for something more demure, and Ron looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. His tie was crooked, his knuckles white against the manila folder he kept shifting in his lap. Councilwoman DeWitt tapped the mic. "We'll begin with item 4, review of enforcement overreach by the Lakeshore Heights Homeowners Association, including alleged unauthorized towing, fraudulent invoicing, and misuse of community funds." Half the room exhaled at once. The sound was heavy, expectant. First speaker Camden Prescott. I stood, walked to the podium, and let the silence stretch just a second longer than polite. "I operate CP Marina Holdings, the sole owner and licensed operator of the Lakeshore Marina. 2 weeks ago, a private towing vehicle entered my property without notification, authorization, or legal cause, and removed a watercraft registered to me. That vehicle was driven by Ronald Landers, an unlicensed operator for commercial removals and the spouse of the HOA president." Ron shifted in his seat. "In the days that followed, I compiled footage, witness statements, and documentation of at least 6 other unauthorized removals, all linked to the same vehicle. None of the removed property was in violation of any municipal code, marina policy, or city ordinance. Furthermore, towing receipts were issued under a shell company not listed in any business registry until 4 days after the removals began." Councilwoman DeWitt raised a brow. "And that company, registered under the maiden name of Tiffany Landers, using a PO. Box associated with a suspended landscaping business from 3 years ago. That got murmurs." I continued. "The HOA distributed memos threatening residents with forced removals of boats, jet skis, and dock accessories. These notices bore the HOA seal, yet there's no record of board votes authorizing such actions. Several residents have stepped forward with proof they were pressured into paying towing and storage fees directly to Mr. Landers, who provided no itemized invoices." DeWitt nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Prescott. Please remain available for follow-up." As I stepped down, she turned to her aide. "Get me copies of those registration records and subpoena financials from that shell entity." Then she looked directly at Tiffany. "Mrs. Landers, you're next." Tiffany rose slowly, smoothing her skirt, trying to maintain composure. But the room was no longer hers. It was never hers, not here. She stepped to the mic. "There's been a misunderstanding," she began, voice thin. "Our community was concerned about unsightly conditions along the lakefront. We only wanted to maintain property values." DeWitt didn't blink. You instructed your husband to tow privately owned vessels from a property not under HOA jurisdiction. I thought, did you or did you not sign the towing memos? Yes, but with the assumption DeWitt raised a hand. Assumptions are not legal grounds for property seizure. Especially not when the property in question is outside the HOA's governance. Tiffany's voice shrank. We were trying to enforce standards. By creating a fake company, she hesitated. It was a placeholder, we meant to formalize it. A man near the back stood. She charged me $200 to get my kayak back, said it was community enforcement, I had to wire it to some landscaping company that doesn't even exist anymore. DeWitt turned to the clerk. Mark that for record. Ron's voice broke the tension. We didn't mean harm. We thought we were helping. From the dais, a different council member leaned forward. You entered a gated marina with bolt cutters, removed personal property and stored it in an unsecured lot. That's not enforcement, that's theft. Ron fell silent, then came the wave. One by one, residents stood. Cheryl from Slip 34 described how her dinghy was gone for 4 days and returned damaged. A retired vet explained how he was threatened with removal fees for an inflatable raft his grandchildren used. A nurse from the hospital detailed how she was billed for her paddleboard being non-compliant because it was the wrong color. Every story added weight. By the time Councilwoman DeWitt banged the gavel, the room was simmering. This council will formally recommend the dissolution of Lakeshore Heights HOA's Enforcement Authority, pending a full review. We will seek criminal charges where applicable and coordinate with the district attorney's office to determine the extent of financial fraud committed. Tiffany stood frozen. Ron stared ahead, jaw slack, but DeWitt wasn't done. To the residents, an interim committee will be formed for neighborhood concerns. Any future enforcement will be handled by municipal code authorities, not clipboard vigilantes. The crowd erupted. Some clapped. Others just exhaled years of tension. I left without looking back at the Landers. Later that week, I got a call from Assistant DA Monroe. We're filing charges. Fraud, unauthorized use of HOA funds, operating under a false business, and criminal trespass. We're also looking at potential RICO violations if we can prove this was ongoing revenue generation through coercion. I let that hang a second. You think it'll stick? Oh, it'll stick. We've got bank records, witness statements, and a trail of forged invoices. This wasn't a mistake, it was a scheme. What about the HOA board? 2 members already resigned. The rest are cooperating. Turns out Tiffany kept them in the dark. She steamrolled decisions, bypassed votes, and altered meeting minutes. We've got copies of both the original and modified versions. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. Let me know if you need more from my end. I will. By the way, nice job keeping everything documented. Most people don't think that far ahead. I hung up and walked out onto the dock. The lake was calm, late sun glittering across the surface. A few kids paddled by on boards, waving. Boats bobbed gently in their slips. Everything in its place. A few days later, a moving truck pulled up to the Landers' house. Word spread quickly they were leaving. No announcement, no goodbye. Just a quiet exodus like smoke vanishing into the wind. The community didn't mourn the loss. With the HOA effectively gutted, the neighborhood formed a volunteer council. Real transparency, this time open meetings, clear votes, no power games. I offered the community room above the bait shop for meetings, free of charge. The Marina's part of this place, I told the new council chair, a schoolteacher named Marlene. It should support the people who live here. She smiled. We could use more folks who think like that. We walked the shoreline, passing residents who now waved with more than just politeness. Their eyes carried something new: relief, maybe even trust. Tyrants fall, but communities they rebuild, stronger. And sometimes all it takes is one boat, one tow, and one clipboard queen flying too close to the sun. I stepped onto the marina deck the morning after the council meeting and felt something I hadn't felt in months' ease. The water was calm, the air fresh with a hint of pine, and for the first time since Ron's toe stunt, the docks felt like mine again. Not in a possessive way, but like they had returned to their natural state free from the creeping reach of HOA nonsense. That feeling didn't last long. Nadia caught me just before I opened the storage bay near the fuel pumps. "You're going to want to see this," she said, holding up her phone. I looked. A grainy photo taken just after dawn showed Ron's tow truck parked near the far end of the marina, the same truck that had been impounded 4 days ago. "Where was this taken?" I asked. "Slip 42, near the old kayak rentals." "Was anyone with him?" She nodded. "2 guys, not locals. One was wearing a jacket from a towing outfit in Greenville. They were trying to get into the locked compound. I saw them from the maintenance shed and called it in, but they left before anyone showed up. That changed things. I called Voss immediately. He didn't even wait for me to finish. He's not supposed to be anywhere near your property. His bail conditions include a no-contact clause with any of the locations tied to the investigation. I've got footage, I told him. We upgraded the cameras last month. Infrared, high-res, full timestamps. Send it. I'll file for a revocation hearing. If he's violating bail, he's going back in. As I uploaded the footage, something else gnawed at me. Why risk it? Especially now, with criminal charges hanging over his head. It didn't make sense unless he had something to hide or destroy. I went down to the old kayak rental hut. The door had been jimmied. Inside, old files were scattered across the floor, nothing too valuable, just outdated lease forms and dusty logbooks. But wedged between one of the filing cabinets, I found a folder that didn't belong, invoices, dozens of them. All printed with the HOA letterhead, but none matching the formatting of official HOA communications. The paper quality was cheaper, the font slightly off. Most were addressed to residents who lived along the Eastern Shore, people who didn't store anything at the marina. Each invoice included charges for shoreline compliance remediation. The amounts varied, anywhere from $50 to $400. All were dated within the same 6-week window in spring. All listed contact info for a company called Shoreline Solutions, LLC. I ran the name through the state's business registry. Nothing came up. I brought the documents straight to Grayson. He adjusted his glasses, flipping through the bundle with growing interest. These weren't sent through the HOA's official channels. No record in their minutes, no authorization notes, and this company, completely fabricated. Could this be enough for wire fraud? If these were emailed or sent through postal services with intent to collect money under false pretenses? Absolutely. What about the residents who paid? He nodded. If any of them wired funds or mailed checks and we can prove Ron or Tiffany received the money, that pushes it into federal territory. I leaned back. I think we're just scratching the surface. Grayson tapped one of the pages. This address. That's a P.O. box over in Millersbury. We can subpoena the box records. If they were picking up mail there, we'll have signatures, surveillance, paper trail. I called Voss again. He didn't hesitate. We'll get a warrant. Between the forged invoices, the shell towing company, and now this second fake business, we've got a pattern of organized fraud. The next morning, federal agents raided the Millersbury postal annex. Surveillance footage showed Ron accessing the box 3 times in May. Each time he left with thick envelopes. One time he signed for a package under the name Trevor Landon. That was enough. Tiffany and Ron were both arrested again, this time by 2 federal agents who showed up at their house with a warrant and a quiet, efficient precision that made the HOA grapevine explode. The community was beyond furious now. Residents who had stayed quiet during the towing drama were suddenly stepping forward with stories. A widow named Helen showed up to the Marina office with a manila envelope full of canceled checks. She'd paid over $1,000 in shoreline fines over the past year, each one demanded by letter, each one signed with a digital stamp of Tiffany's name. I thought it was real, she said, voice shaking. They threatened to put a lien on my property. I couldn't risk it. Grayson included her testimony in the civil suit he was preparing. It turned out Helen wasn't alone. By the end of the week, over 20 residents had come forward. Altogether, the Landers had collected more than $30,000 through the fake company. Most of it had been laundered through prepaid debit cards and fake vendor payouts. But even that wasn't the end. Voss called me again. "Camden, we found something else." During the search of the Landers' home, we recovered a second laptop. Encrypted, but our techs cracked it. What's on it? Blueprints. They were planning to acquire easement control over the eastern Marina access road. Tiffany drafted a fake proposal to rezone the land as community use shoreline, which would have let the HOA claim partial jurisdiction. She even had a forged letter of support from a city planner who retired 3 years ago. I exhaled slowly. They were trying to take the property by reshaping the land use designation. Exactly. If they'd pulled it off, they could have forced other homeowners into compliance zones they controlled. Fines, permits, even dock access fees. It was a long con. Not just petty coercion but a planned takeover. The federal charges included wire fraud, mail fraud, criminal conspiracy, and attempted land misappropriation through falsified municipal documentation. Tiffany's bail was denied. Ron's was revoked. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Between the video logs, the fraudulent invoices, the forged letters, and the bank records, the prosecution barely had to try. The judge, an old sea captain turned judge with a no-nonsense attitude, called their scheme a cartoonish attempt at organized fraud wrapped in a beige cardigan of HOA bureaucracy. The jury took less than 4 hours. Both were convicted. Tiffany received 5 years in federal prison. Ron got 3. Restitution was ordered, and their assets, including their home, were seized to repay the residents they defrauded. The HOA, now stripped of its enforcement authority and gutted of leadership, was placed under city oversight. A new committee was formed, this time with real accountability. Elections were open. Term limits were enforced. No more secret meetings. No more fines without due process. I never asked for control, but they did offer me a spot on the new advisory council. I declined and suggested Helen instead. She accepted, and the room gave her a standing ovation. Weeks later, I stood at the edge of the dock, watching the sunset ripple across the water. The marina was alive again. Families laughing, grills sizzling, sails catching the evening breeze. No more clipboard patrols, no more whispers of towing threats. Nadia walked up beside me. "Feels different now," she said. I nodded. "Better. You ever think about putting up a plaque for what?" She smiled. "For the day the dock fought back," I laughed. "No plaque, just peace." And that was enough.